Hey everyone, I'm Anya Esma and I spoke to Kieu Dang, formerly known as the Half-Ass Witch on Instagram. So we will have an interview today and you will see stuff like this.
I became a witch in a widely Christian community physically, and now I'm becoming a Christian in a very big online community of witches. I never really fit in the pagan community either because I was never, ew, the Bible, ew, Christians, whatever. I have not really thought of myself as a witch for a long time, even after I put like the half-ass witch away and I just kind of went with like Qco for my business.
So as you heard, Kieu has recently become Christian after having been very active in the pagan community. They had their own business, they worked with people from the community, they created a lot of content around paganism and so on. So after owning a spiritual business and being so active, of course, there's a lot to talk about. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Anya Esma. I read tarot and I do shadow work and I show other people how to do that on my YouTube channel and on whatever other channels I have, like Instagram. And for context, I should say that I'm not part of any organized religion. I do not subscribe to any firm belief system that is propagated by any church or any philosophy or anything like that. I sort of have my own belief system that's independently, but of course informed by these systems. And I do consider myself a witch, so of course there are some points where Kieu and I have different opinions.
I view spell work specifically, like people going out of their way to manifest something, contextually as a sin, only because God has a plan for you, and it's like your little human brain cannot even fathom all the little moving pieces in life that can do that. But what one of my missions is to say that you are what God has made you and not what other people think God has made you. And so if you are a witch, if you believe that you find a lot of help in spirit work or in using your candles or whatever, then do it.
So to make it clear, this is an interview where I talk to Kieu and they give their perspective on things and their ideas, opinions, beliefs. And it's not a discussion where I go in and I say, oh, I think differently. It's really an interview where we are supposed to listen to Kieu. That's the intention behind this. So to give some of you some backstory in case you don't know Kieu, I followed them for like 3 years now probably and watched their business change a lot during that time. And their focus was usually on communication with the dead, with ancestors, with pagan gods. They educated people on Instagram through courses, through one-on-one counseling, and just generally offered their services with regards to these topics. But then a few weeks ago, they posted a picture that said there are some changes coming and that the only hint that they will give is their bio. So this is what their bio looked like back then. This is what it looks like now. It's ever changing, of course. It's always a process. I think bios are one of those things where if you determine them a month later, you're kind of out of alignment with it and you're like, I want to change it again. So that's probably what happened here, but this is what people originally saw and this is what it looks like now. So as you can see, it says things like prodigal Christian prophet, Daoist, and ancestral medium, and that's just things that, it's words that you usually do not see in this combination. So of course people were like, whoa, what's going on? And it's quite the bio. It is quite the bio. So seeing those words, I think, triggered people a lot, of course. So we'll talk about what people's reactions were like and what they are still like today.
If I don't have the word queer, if I don't have my pronouns, and if I don't have I used to be a pagan in my bio, which I shouldn't have to advertise that. I shouldn't have to like make sure everybody knows my sexuality and my sexual status and like my gender identity and whatever, just to prove that I'm not a bigot.
Now, before we finally get into the interview, I want to talk about why I'm doing this interview at all, because my channel is obviously about tarot, about shadow work, about witchcraft, about spirituality, and so on, not about Christianity. But knowing my community, so that's you people, I think that you'd still be interested in this because if you are interested at all in the whole sphere of religion, paganism, witchcraft, I think interviews like these are important and interesting to just see different perspectives. So I want to give people the opportunity to sort of hear Kieu's perspective and Kieu's side of things, because I think a lot of people judge them, which is fair. You can do that. But I think sometimes it's still worth it to listen to people, you know? So please do be respectful in the comments. I've never had to say this on a video, and I'm not sure I have to say it now because I have a lot of faith and trust in my community. Still, you guys. But I don't know what might happen, so I just want to say it. The intention, as I said, is to listen. And of course, you can give your opinions, you can discuss things in the comments, you can share your feelings about what it did to you when you first saw it, how you think of it now, how you thought of it before the interview, after the interview, etc. So I would love to see some discussion there. As a last piece of context, I want to give that Kieu was raised in Pentecostal evangelism, which is a sect of Christianity that does believe in things like mediumship, healing hands, and concepts that nowadays we would not associate with Christianity and maybe more think of as witchcraft. So that is quite an interesting perspective as well.
I'm really settling into this like role as a prophet and role as somebody who is delivering the gospel according to me. And I think that, that's probably sacrilegious to a lot of people, but to me, it's the natural progression of things.
So now, with all that being said, with all the previews done, with all the little snippets done, let's get into the interview. It's just going to be an hour of Kieu and I talking, and at the end I will come in and have some words. Welcome, Kieu. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. A lot of people probably have a lot of questions, and it's been like
Really?
3.5 years since we had our last interview on my channel, and a lot of things have changed, and we're going to talk about all of that. So to start off, I just want to give you the opportunity to just introduce yourself in your own words, because if I do it, I may get some nuances wrong or something. So without getting too much into the history, who are you right now? What are you doing right now?
So my name is Kieu. Kieu Dang. The people used to know me as the half-ass witch on the line. Now I just kind of go by my name, which also is another name change. This is my Vietnamese name. Right now, I am currently working as a prophet for God, lay Christian God, and I'm doing a lot of work actually of what I like to call like flipping tables in the temples of every kind, which is essentially I've been in a lot of different spiritual spaces, and generally what I've always done in my work is try and like point out and kind of hold up a little bit of a mirror of what needs to be fixed, what's not really good, and what's kind of like more of a human mistake and not necessarily a problem that spirit has. So I'm really excited to be able to come out into the world as a Christian. I am a ex-pagan. I'm also queer. I have a beautiful cat. I live in California, and I'm just trying to like live my life like Jesus, and I want everyone to be nice to me. And that's my bio. Please be nice to me.
I love I love that. Yeah, so you said it already. You're a Christian now, ex-pagan. And when you first made that post and changed your bio, I think it was a bit of a shock for a lot of people. Um, Before you basically had a full-time business, connecting people to the dead, to ancestors, teaching people how to do that themselves as well in courses, and just generally being in the pagan sphere. But to be honest, the reason I wasn't so shocked was because I spoke to you before. You grew up Christian, your grandfather was a pastor, you called some of your pagan content Sunday service, so I feel like you've always sort of had like a Christian framing, or at least the terminology. You've talked about the Bible and not necessarily in a disparaging way or something. So I feel like it's kind of like going back to the roots. So I wasn't so shocked, but a lot of other people probably were because, you know, depending on how long you've been in the community, people think of Doreen Virtue and people like that who converted and told
Right.
people, oh, you're going to hell if you purchase my products and stuff like that.
Now, please also continue to purchase my products because I back pretty much all of them still. And that's actually one of the things that I really appreciate about you is that like you have stuck around. And I thought that it's interesting, right? That everyone, or not everyone, I don't know everyone, thankfully, that a bunch of people were shocked because I have always said that I grew up in a Pentecostal evangelical family. And while I obviously know that there are some bad things at the hands of the people of the church, just like, I look at the Bible like any other historical text, like how people read the Edda, and also like the Tao and the art of war and whatever. And so, yeah, I've always kind of paid homage to my ancestors, and I still do that. I mean, I still think it's important to talk to dead people. I talk to my dead people all the time. I bring my dead grandpa to church all the time. And I do also think that it's important that people know that, like, yeah, I don't think you're going to hell. First of all, I believe that hell is a mental space. Hell is that we keep reincarnating onto this earth and we still have to be people. But you're not going to hell because you purchase my products or you learn how to talk to a deity through my classes or whatever. I still think all of that stuff is valid, and I still have all my altars up, and I still have, my Hawthorne paintings, and I have a beautiful painting of Loki that I did, and I keep those because I believe that God brought me those things and those deities and those entities in order to get me where I'm at now, which is, where I'm going. Who knows where he's going to take me, but I like where I'm at right now and it's fun.
So I first kind of want to talk about the reactions that people had to that, because at first, the way you say it now, it's more nuanced, but when it first came out, it was like, oh, people don't know, like, have to wait how you actually are, what kind of Christian, I guess.
Yeah. What flavor?
So why do you think it was such a shock to people, even though you've never really hidden or disowned or rejected that past of Christianity you had?
That's really interesting because, see, I feel this is so funny. This is one of the ways that I feel like God just like affirms what we're supposed to be doing. Because this morning I was like writing a Substack article, and it literally is about this. It's about the reactions that I got, and it's got screenshots and everything. And what I noticed really is that I think that people were shocked that I was coming at things from, you know, a lens that is a little bit more nuanced. And I think a lot of people don't want to move past their pain, which is very valid. We all have trauma from the church, me especially, right? Like there's a lot, and I talk about it a lot. And I think that what it really was is I think people were shocked at the mirror really that I was holding up and the reflections that I was giving, because there are a lot of people, even in my community, and some of the reactions that were good, I think also shocked people. I had a lot of comments and clients and even past class goers come to me and tell me like, oh, I just had this moment in my own brain. I'm so glad somebody is here talking about this. And it seemed to really upset more witches than it did Christians, which was a very interesting thing for me to see. So I think really a lot of the shock came from people not recognizing that we can be all things at once. And I am very much an example of like, I'm everything. But I have a very clear vision as I go along of how I want that to be, and my own integrity that I kind of maintain. And I think maybe because people are like, wow, Kieu is always so controversial, that I've moved to something that is controversial in maybe like a negative way, and also controversial in the witchcraft sphere and the pagan sphere specifically, because there is a lot of pain attached to it and a lot of trauma and a lot of like negativity. And I think when people see me pushing a lot of the positivity that you really do have to search for and you have to be nuanced about, they don't like that. And then and you project it onto other people. And I think a lot of the other shock is that I am not here to be a punching bag for anyone. And I'm also going to defend everybody that's in my community that wants to be there to express whatever it is that they're going through. So a lot of the shock also came with my reactions to people kind of coming at me a little bit the wrong way, like in public, instead of trying to genuinely come into my like messages or see what's going on, or like you, right? Like wait it out a little bit and see like, okay, what's going on here? A lot of other people kind of just took my new Instagram bio and were like mad at me about it. And I was like, look, let's just stick around a little. Let's see what's up. And because I wouldn't say combative, but I do compare myself a lot in terms of like how Jesus was very sassy. He was like, did you read the scripture? Like, have you read that? Also, like, he saw people selling stuff in the temple and literally flipped their tables over and I think like hit somebody and then left. And I compare myself a lot like that, and a lot of people don't really view proper Christianity that way, even people who have never been Christians, or even people who haven't really gotten into the Christian texts. And I think maybe it was just a shock that people were like, oh, this is something that I never thought could exist. And that's, I mean, no matter what, that's hard. It doesn't matter where we're coming from or what we're talking about, right? Like the first time somebody saw a parakeet, they were probably like, what the fuck is that? So I'm just, the prodigal parakeet prophet of the internet, and I'm cool with it.
Okay, and did anyone's reaction, either online or offline, actually hurt you? Did any of that actually get to you, or did any rudeness that you got stick with you, or are you just like, meh, whatever?
You know what? I would be lying if I said that it really always rolls off, like water on a duck's back. I think that I am very lucky that I grew up bullied a lot. I was the only Asian person who was like straight up from Asia, not only just in my school, but like my county and my community. And I was the only adopted like Vietnamese Chinese kid. So, of course, I have been kind of I've been yeah, I've been bullied by a lot of people for a lot of things. And I think what really only hurts about this situation is that there are some people that I thought have been around for a while who have been part of my content or have been part of my community that haven't even reached out or anything and kind of just blocked me. And for me, what it really is it's just like this. I think it's more like a sad, I don't take it personally. It's more like a sadness about the community and about how we preach tolerance a lot, especially in like the pagan and the spiritual communities, and also just like evolution and recognizing everybody's on their own path. But then when I am on my path, and it's not what everybody likes to see, it is a complete shunning, and that has been maybe one of the things that has hurt the most, which is just to see that a community that is built, especially on the internet, of course, but even in person, on like the connectivity and the understanding of other people, it's like they'll extend it to everybody except for when you make them a little bit uncomfortable, which
Yeah.
is how we grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also, it puts you in this weird space where I think people expect you, if you say, oh, I'm Christian now, they expect you to explain everything and be like, but hold
Right.
on, I'm not like that. And you have to then go into a space of naming all of the things that you're not, that they probably think that you might be negatively. And I think
Exactly.
that's not a good space to be in because it's defensive. It's not defining who you actually are. It's like, I'm none of this. Don't think of me like this. And I think you're kind of trying to find the middle ground of saying what you're not, but also trying to communicate your new path and what you actually are. And I think that's really difficult to walk that line.
Well, it's been really weird too because we think about like the internet and we think about how like I of course am incorporating this into my business because I'm an entrepreneur, and also I'm Capricorn. Like I'm just one of those people that I don't feel like my life's work is worth it unless I'm using it to help other people with theirs. So when I incorporate this stuff into, people are like, oh, Q's changing her whatever to make more money. And I'm like, first of all, this is the worst economic decision if you were looking at this from a business standpoint. For me to be a like big and out like pagan figure and then to be like, I love Jesus now, right? Like that is just like dumb from like a business standpoint. But I think that it is a really good opportunity for me to kind of recognize some things that a lot of people have had to go through that maybe really haven't had to in a while. Like I did just realize like 2 or 3 days ago that if I don't have the word queer, if I don't have my pronouns, and if I don't have I used to be a pagan in my bio, which I shouldn't have to advertise that. I shouldn't have to like make sure everybody knows my sexuality and my sexual status and like my gender identity and whatever, just to prove that I'm not a bigot and just to prove that I'm not a homophobe. Like I have to almost, and I'm okay sharing these stories because it has always been part of my life to share my experiences, but I do feel like there's something negative about having to have to all the time, right? Share these like deep traumatic moments of my life from Christianity and from paganism to explain why I'm here, and I can't just like be here. And when I was a pagan, that was not something I really had to do, except for the fact that, I always have to say that I'm queer and that I am, anti-racism and whatever, because people look at me and they're like, oh, a pretty femme Asian girl, and they think that it's like all privilege, which I do have privilege. I'm not even going to lie about that. But also, there's a lot of things in the background that people would only know if they paid attention to my work for 10 minutes. And that's what's really been interesting too, is that a lot of the people who are asking me to kind of like advertise who I am and who I'm not are people who won't take the time to put in the work to go read all the work that I've done, or the 8 years of podcasts, even the video that I did with you. Like, it wouldn't really be hard to see our last interview and to see how I got here. But because people are used to having, and I blame the internet a little bit. I feel like a boomer, right? Because it's like, the internet. Like, I blame the internet because there's such this like ease of access of information, and people are a little bit less, I guess, like contextually literate to be able to kind of form conclusions that are based on all the information. And that's what I'm trying to teach, because that's the problem with Christianity right now, and how people see Christians and how Christians see other people. But it's not a fun place to be all the time. I just said, like, the other day to my partner, like, thankfully, Jesus did the whole like, I'm gonna die on the cross thing. But when the universe or God or whatever, whoever gives you a purpose in life, you've got a cross to bear at some point, right? Like, when I always say, like, this is a Lao Tzu thing from the Tao, which is, not everybody has the bones for it. Not everybody has the bones for the gods. It doesn't mean, right, like, you can't talk to the gods. It means, like, not everybody can hold all that energy. Not everybody can be bullied on the internet like me and flip it around and turn it into an article and understand that it's really not about me. It's just, I happen to be a person and people are putting their stuff on me, and my job is to show that, and not even maybe necessarily to show myself. So it's been a wild ride. It is kind of weird, and I am still trying to navigate that. Sometimes I'm a little bit like, why do I have to say all this to people? But then sometimes I think about, like, all the people who don't say it, and all the people who can't, or don't feel like they can, or don't have the words. And if I can be like, it's so stupid, right? Like that, like this little light of mine thing. I do not believe in letting my little light, like, whatever, because if I can light the way for like one person, literally one person, I've done my job. I'm happy.
Yeah. And what role did your family play in all of this? Because if that's not too private, if it's too private, you don't have to answer that. But
Like,
I know that you were like no contact with them for a while. How is that now?
I actually have come to this really cool place where I have gained this wonderful relationship again with my mother, my adopted mother, who we had a really hard time. And part of the reason was because when I was younger, my upbringing was very much colored with like Christian biases, and like I came from Pentecostal evangelism. That is one of the most like crazy, I would say, like and very well known Christian sects to be oppressive, and also though very spiritual. Like the I always feel really lucky, actually, because I came specifically from a sect of Christianity that believes in like channeling and prophecy and like psychic work and whatever. It's more about like the condemning comes from the context of the Bible and the context of like who you're going to and why. But I mean, I don't care. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, God gave me the gift of prophecy, so I'm going to use it. And I was very much raised in a family that my grandpa is a pastor. I've seen him, lay hands and heal. I've seen him speak in tongues, and I've seen people go through some crazy spiritual stuff right in front of me from a very young age. So that was a really cool thing to be able to kind of just accept in these last couple of weeks, to be like, you know what, actually, like, my upbringing really did set me up for this. And then when I went no contact with my mom for a while, that was a good thing too, because I got to separate from my mom and from the religious practices of my family that were like taught to me, to be able actually to use discernment and think about how I felt for myself about Christianity. And I do vary from what my mom thinks, and I'm educating her a little bit. I literally just wrote in my journal, I was like, thank you, God, for an experience I never thought I would have, which was a 3-hour conversation that was very philosophical with my mother. When before we went no contact, I felt weird telling her that I had to go to a therapist. Like, it's such a big change, and that's been wonderful. My grandma just passed a couple months ago, and my grandpa's passing was really like the catalyst for me really analyzing being in church and like what type of person he was, because both my grandma and my grandpa, the people that showed up for their funerals and the way that their community spoke about them, it was all good things. Now, granted, my grandma was a little bit more like me. They called her a force of nature at her funeral, so we all know what that means. She's a lot, but everybody who talked about them and my grandpa especially, it was always about love. It was always like, no matter what people were going through, no matter if they didn't agree with you or not, it was always like, what does the actual scripture say? Not people, not those who interpret it, not these crazy groups protesting stupid things that don't need to be protested, right? Like, so I'm very grateful to the journey that I've had with my family. I'm grateful actually that my inner rebellious nature of being forced to be in a church family, but also seeing all the hypocrisy and also being in a church family in administration roles to see like kind of the background end of a church, it taught me how to choose my own opinions. It taught me how to, follow my inner compass. And I always talk about lighthouses. My grandpa was like a big lighthouse guy. And I always think about like a good spiritual leader is the one who takes care of the light to lead people on. I'm not telling you to come live in my lighthouse. Please don't. I don't like that. I am trying to tell you to create your own lighthouse and how to keep it and how to like steer yourself away from the moments where, sometimes there are storms that like just be against you, and it can be these people on the internet. It could be your own emotions, it could be your own history and your confusion with it. But as long as you have that like light to be able to be like, okay, well, I know where I don't want to crash. I know where I absolutely am not vibing with. And I know kind of like my inner compass of, does this feel right? I learned that from my family, both because they taught that to me and both because I had to learn it to avoid them and to avoid becoming like them in the ways that I knew were not good, which they will also admit. So my family is God-given, absolutely, right? And my own journey with being adopted has been really interesting within that. But I think everything is for a reason. I don't think God was punishing me when when my mom was punishing me, but I believe that God gave me the gift to be able to see, with my own personal eyes and wisdom and discernment, the other sides of that and to be able to kind of heal past that. So it's been beautiful. It's been weird. It's been great. And I think that that's also one of the things that people are shocked about, which is I was very much a like, don't talk to people who are not there for you and whatever. And I still fully believe that, right? I had to move away from my mom for my mom to grow in her ability to come to me, a little bit more equally and a little bit more understanding. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just that's just what time does. That's just what our own choices are. And God never, I believe, and this is why I am so like pro Christianity, pro Christian God, is the message is, right, like the honor thy father and mother. Yeah, but they have to honor you also, right? Like just treat other people how you want to be treated. And I do that in every way and not in just the nice little flowery way. And I learned that from my family too. So we're seeing that come
Yeah.
out a lot.
I think that's really beautiful because I feel like if we stop contact with someone, a lot of the time we assume it's going to be like that forever. At least
Right.
I do that because I think the younger you are, the more you think that, oh, it's just going to be forever. And then the older you get, you're like, well, maybe they'll talk to me. Yeah, you're like, maybe they'll talk to me in 5 years again or something. Let's see how things change. You're a bit more patient.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really beautiful that you didn't see it coming, but that it happened.
No, and
Um,
I actually chose to reach back out to my mom because my mom was diagnosed with cancer in the last couple of years. So there's just so much going on in my life that I was like, I got to do something. I got to like figure out what's going on. But in that, like, she had ovarian cancer, and I literally just talked to my mom about this. She said like she's not ever going to say God gave her cancer, and neither will I. However, we both recognize that in that point that was also a catalyst for my mom to really analyze a lot of things. And if we're going to come at this from like a spiritual symbolic sense, it was ovarian cancer, and it was an issue between a mother and a daughter. Really, that was the thing, and that's what got fixed. The cancer is gone, thankfully. My mom is in remission. And I also would say that the cancer that was in our relationship is also in remission too. It's not that it was never there, but we have gone in and biopsied and cut it out, and we've figured out how to deal with each other in a way that is harmonious for both of us, right? We're coming into like Libra season, and like it's balanced. It is so balanced, but people forget that to create balance you have to look at the imbalance and then maybe create some more. And that's actually more of what I feel like I'm doing. And I'm a lot more satisfied with how I'm doing it. And I'm seeing it in my personal relationships, especially with my mom, which, people always say, like, that's your Jesus story, right? Like, some people are like, oh, I became, I was an alcoholic and I got sober, or whatever. Like, my whole thing is I did cocaine for a long time and then I got sober, but that was my come to Loki moment. That wasn't my come to Jesus. But that was more like the Jesus and Loki to Kieu moment. And then I think, like, these moments now that I'm having with my mom are very much like, wow, like, look at what God has done, because I let him, because I was like, I'm gonna back out now. I'm just gonna be the person that I need to be and treat my mom how I would want to be treated in this situation, which is really fucking hard. It's hard shit.
Yeah. Okay, I kind of want to talk about witchy stuff a little bit.
I love witchy.
So there are quite a few Christian witches online. There are also witches who wouldn't call themselves Christians, but they do work with Christian angels or the Virgin Mary or Jesus from the Bible and so on. So how do you place yourself in that framework of witchcraft? Do you still consider yourself a witch? Do witchcraft and Christianity exclude each other? Do they not? What's your beliefs around that?
I think that, like, for me, it's a matter of linguistics. I've not really thought of myself as a witch for a long time, even after I put, like, the half-ass witch away and I just kind of went with like QCO for my business. Because I just feel like the word witch is limiting, right? The same way that the word Christian is very limiting, right? Like, when I was a witch, I had to, in my community when I was starting, it's so funny, like, I've come to these full circles of, like, I became a witch in a widely Christian community physically, and now I'm becoming a Christian in a very big online community of witches. And one thing that I kind of realized is, like, yeah, when I was a witch, I had to be like, but I'm not that kind of a witch, right? Like, I'm not hexing people so they die or whatever. And I think that, like, if I was going to really define myself, I would say that I am a non-denominational Christian. I pull a lot of my influences from the style of Pentecostalism and evangelism, just because that's where I came from. I wasn't raised Catholic. I was raised a Protestant Christian. And even, like, my partner Eric, right? Like, he would call himself also like a non-dogmatic Christian, but he came from Catholicism, so he's got a lot more of that in there. For me, I still consider myself a spirit worker. When I say the word prophet, that is probably the most accurate word I've ever felt settle into my soul. And I fought with God a lot on that, actually. I was like, please don't. I'm going to have the Pope coming after me now. Like, I don't want to fight with Frankie out here. This is just not my ideal. But all a prophet is somebody who speaks on behalf of God or speaks God's lessons and wants to teach people about being a better freaking person. So that makes a lot more sense to me than to say that I am a Christian witch, because I wouldn't really consider myself a Christian, except for I am. It's weird. And then I also wouldn't really consider myself as a witch either. And even when I was a witch, I didn't. I was more of a psychic, more of a, death worker. I guess I called myself a death witch for a long time, because that was the only language that I had to be able to kind of define what it was that I did. But even that kind of gave its own connotation and context to people. I think witchcraft and Christianity are actually not separate. I think that, if people actually read the Bible, especially in terms of ancestor work, which is really important to me, speaking to the dead, I feel like they would see a lot of proof that the scripture actually says to utilize those tools and those gifts, right? Like, people always want to talk about sin. It's a sin to do XYZ. So I feel like it's a sin if I can talk to dead people to be like, oh, I can't do that because I'm a Christian now. Like, no, God's like, well, I gave you that. What am I, a joke? Hello. So sometimes I feel like people want to, put on the shame that other people gave them in order to feel like they're defending themselves, which I absolutely understand, right? Like, I've been there. I think a lot of us have been there. But what one of my missions is to say that you are what God has made you and not what other people think God has made you. And so if you are a witch, if you believe that you find a lot of help in spirit work or in using your candles or whatever, then do it. I don't care, as long as you're not literally trying to be an awful human being. Like, that's it, right? Like, just don't be an awful human being. Consider things like consent, obviously. Like, even when I was a witch, I was like, please don't do love spells to make people love you, because that's just not how that works. It's not how any of this works. And I think about, like, there's a difference to me between the ignorance and the arrogance thing. It's like sometimes we manifest or whatever because we are ignorant to God's greater plan. We're ignorant to whatever else the possibilities are because we're human beings. And if you want to take God out of it, but the universe, right? Like for me, I view spell work specifically, like people going out of their way to manifest something, contextually as a sin, only because God has a plan for you, and it's like your little human brain cannot even fathom all the little moving pieces in life that can do that. So if you're going out of your way and you're like, God, I really want a Bugatti, like I'm trying to manifest this Bugatti, and God's gonna be like, I was gonna give you 50 Bugattis, but here's your one Bugatti, I guess. Like here's your one Bugatti for your candle. But I also view that, like, I just actually had a friend who did a hex for a situation that she's having at work. And it was pretty much just like a spicy jar in a freezer where she said she wanted the truth to be revealed about that person and then also the truth to be revealed about her. And I was like, God is going to support that because all you are doing, A, is defending yourself, and B, you are not trying to tell God how to do something. You're just telling him, like, look, if you bring the truth out, I will also be truthful, right? It's that promise, that covenant that you have of like, I'm going to show up the way I need to show up in my lane as a human being based on what I can do. And then I will trust whatever other forces I believe in to also show up that way, which is something that I think every spiritual path or every spiritual, like, philosophical set of communities or whatever teaches. It's not just a Christian thing. I think, again, the labels, when people put words on stuff, shit gets convoluted because people have their own opinions about words, but nobody will look up what a word means, which is so interesting to me. Like the internet's right there, guys.
Yeah, and I think especially with regards to manifestation, I feel like within the last 2 years, it's just gotten so trendy that people just kind of forgot how to do it properly, because in witchcraft, it is kind of general knowledge that you end a spell with or whatever is best for me, kind of trusting the universe.
Absolutely. That's what amen means. Amen. Amen, however you want to pronounce that. Like, I have my little California girl accent, so I'm not out here like amen. But it literally means it can be trusted, right? It means like, and so it can be trusted, or so it is true. And I always laugh because it's like basically amen means I know that's right. And it's like, yeah, when people really look into the meanings of these words, we're all saying the same thing, and and that's what I say too when Christians are like, Buddhism's not real or Confucianism's not real, or like, working with Horus is a bad thing. I'm like, look, if you believe in God, then you believe that God made these people and God gave them the tools to understand via their own language and their own cultures the universe that God created. So, it's that whole like, we are all one, but we're not situation. And I think that when we really get down to brass tacks, it's like God is everywhere, and it's humans who have divided each other.
Yeah. So, do you feel like there was a specific moment when you felt that it was time to convert, where you somehow felt unaligned with your path, or was it like kind of a process and you can't really pinpoint one moment?
I think it was a really big process. I left the Christian church mostly because I had problems with the community and the way people treated each other. I didn't see God in church, really, is what it was. Thankfully, like the church that I went to when I was growing up, like they were not as nasty as some other churches. It was mostly just like old people that gossip. It's just a lot of old gossiping old people. But I have seen a lot of persecution at the hands of the church, and as like a not straight, not gender conforming person, and also a not white person, I've always kind of been like not happy with that. So I moved to spirituality and outside of Christianity, paganism, whatever, because really I wanted a community. I wanted what people said they were getting out of church and out of the universe or whatever, just from somewhere else. And also I wanted to look into my own like upbringing or my own cultures in terms of being an Asian person, right? Like all of those different spiritual practices that are in there. And I just remember like going through so many things, way more things that were a lot more personally hurtful from the spiritual community and from people who I was supposed to be able to trust, business partners, colleagues, clients, friends that I met through like the work that I was doing as a pagan, that I just, I always use the prodigal son as a metaphor, because there's a moment in that story where he just kind of looks around and he's like, I am in a pen of pig shit. Like, he's just like, this is just not it. I have to go back to whatever it was, at least that I at one time was in, so that I can see why I left it, and see, like, why did I think this was going to be better. And really, it was kind of that. I think I had just had so much, I'd had enough with the non-Christian spiritual community, that I was like, all right, you know what, maybe I just need to go to church. And one of the things that really helped, actually, was I was sitting at my grandpa's funeral, and the pastor, who is my pastor now, who was like mentored by my grandfather and also mentored by my grandpa's mentor, he came up to me and he was like, I read an article that you wrote, and the article that I wrote was actually about how his church was, they were trying to start a church where I live, and because they were not the right type of Christianity, essentially all the other churches like sued them out of the county. And it was awful. It was traumatic for them. And it was just like a big example of, like, that's just like fucked up shit. That's people shit. It's not Christian stuff, it's people stuff. So he came to me and he's like, I read your article. And of course, my first reaction was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because I was like full pagan at that point in a church. I was like, oh, people are going to think that I'm like going to burn in hell because I'm literally walking through these doors. And I remember the first thing he said, he was like, I just want to let you know that I appreciate that you defended us, and that you told the truth. And that was like one of the most eye-opening things, because to be in a church 5 feet away from my grandfather's dead body, by the way, after I had just got behind a pulpit to give just a nice speech about my grandpa, but for the first time in a long time, being in a church, on a church stage, which I hadn't been since I was maybe like 17. That was, I think, the moment where I was like, oh, there's something happening here. And it literally took a whole 3 years for me to eventually become comfortable enough to, like, I said to myself, okay, if I'm gonna get into the Bible, if I'm gonna get back into Christianity just to like dip my toes in the water, I want to be guided by my family, and I want to be guided by the people who I know there is integrity, because my grandpa is one of the most, I will say, one of the best preachers I've ever seen as a person. He was just a wonderful person, and everybody will tell you that. And so knowing that the preacher that we have now, our pastor, Daryl, he preaches so much like my grandpa, sometimes it makes me cry, because I'm like, that's what I mean by like the dead people are coming, they're in church and they're talking to me. And there was just one day where we sat down, we watched one of their live stream sermons that are on YouTube, and I was like, you know what, I really want to go. And lucky for us, they're only an hour away from where we're at, and I walked in and it was just love. Everybody knew what I did. Everybody knew where I came from. Everybody knew my mom. They knew who I was and who my family was. And nobody was like, so what are you doing here? Why are you here? Which is really interesting, because I think if I was now a Christian and I walked into a big pagan spiritual event, everyone would be like, what are you doing here? Like, what's the deal? Tell me about it. Nobody did that to me. Everyone was just happy I was there. And I really did feel like I was coming back into like this beautiful, warm embrace of what I really, really missed when I was younger, and what I think that I pushed aside for my own, to protect myself. And again, right, like, you put other people's pain come onto you, and then you make that your pain, and then you inflict more pain on yourself and onto other people. And I think I was just tired of it. And there were even some things where I was looking at witchcraft and being like, man, I get that I can do this, right? Like, I get that I can go out of my way to figure out what's happening in another person's brain. I can pull cards and be like, okay, what is my mom thinking about me after this or whatever? But it's like, that knowledge just put way more stress on me than, I needed. And even just the, like, I manifested this, but like, it's coming in a different way, and then always looking for it, and then always trying to explain myself. I never really fit in the pagan community either, because I was never, ew, the Bible, ew, Christians, whatever. I've always been a very neutral party, or at least objective party in that. And so I think that actually one thing that has been just so important to me in this is to be able to create that community that I never had. And I thought that I was doing it when I was doing the half-ass switch, and I thought that I was doing it when I was doing like Mystic Mysteries or esoteric school, and I thought that I was doing it when I was just doing my live streams. And it's not that I wasn't, but it was more like what I wanted what I was doing was 50% of what I really, really, really wanted. And now I feel like the other 50% has come in because I have accepted a lot more of myself and my family and where I come from.
Yeah, and later I also want to talk about that, the fact that it's so difficult to build a community in pagan spaces or witchcraft spaces because you just you can't say that you're going to like someone or agree with someone based on it. I guess it's the same in Christianity. Just because someone's Christian, you're not going to get along with them.
Right.
But the thing is that in pagan spaces, I feel like that's often the assumption that, oh, you're a witch too, so we'll get along, or
Absolutely.
you're into manifestation, we'll get along.
Yeah, and I even came to the thing of like, oh, we're all witches, and there's a lot of us who are witches of color, right? So we're all, of course, not going to teach these like shitty white supremacist and like colonial ideals, or like a lot of us are gender queer, a lot of us are autistic as hell, right? So like, I thought that because everyone was so aware, seemingly, of the things that they want to foster community around, that community would be fostered ethically. And you know what, there were some instances where like people, I worked with somebody who was a straight up nurse, and she invited me to go do breath work at a place where nobody vaxxed. And everyone was just like doing, like, they sold mushrooms illegally in the lobby of the yoga studio, right? And I was like, oh, I don't know about all this one. I don't know if I like all that, right? And then we're seeing everybody with their like their divine feminine, divine masculine, like twin flame thing. I don't think twin flames are real. I've never thought they were real. Like, I believe that people come together for reasons, but just the way that, nobody even would research their spiritual beliefs outside of Christianity. All of this what is it called? Not when people are a manifesting generator, what is that? Because I know that's apparently what I am. Human
Human
design.
design. Yeah.
Right. Human design is essentially taken from the Kabbalah. It's taken also from TCM. It's taken from like the Daoist belief of how you move through the body into the underworld. And nobody knows that because nobody wants to research it, because they just want to say, I'm a manifesting generator and this is why I am the way that I am. I'm an empath. And so I whatever, whatever. And it's like, cool. All of those things can be true, but maybe we can define them in ways that are not oppressive and colonial, and also maybe we can just like define those in ways that don't have to make us feel special. I think that's what a lot of this like
Yeah.
spiritual group stuff is. It's a lot of, a lot of these spiritual people are doing, it's trauma bonding, right? A lot of people are wanting what churches have, which is the intergenerational community where, I can walk into church and people can be like, hey, I remember when I went to high school with your mom. And I'm like, please don't tell me about that. That's weird, but also cute, right? Like, there's a lot of family history I don't have to explain. There's a lot of personal context that I don't have to explain, even if it's people I haven't talked to for 15 years, whatever. But then I move into these spiritual spaces that I'm still active in because I'm still wanting to help people, and I'm still like believing that God puts me where I need to be. And if I don't have a problem being in places, I'm happy to be there. But I am seeing like the trauma bonding, right? The forced intimacy. This like, it's weird if you don't share all of your trauma the first time you come into something, or it's weird if somebody wants to trauma dump on you and you're like, look, I don't care. Not like I don't care because I don't care about you, but I don't care because it doesn't really matter. It's more about like, who are you right now and what are you trying to accomplish, and what do you want to be. And I feel like a lot of people have really just kind of left spirituality, or left Christianity, because they don't like Christian people, but they want what the Christians have. And it's like, I get it. I totally understand. And I am not a person who's like, you have to go into a chapel right now. I don't care, right? Like, your church could be you and two other people in your living room. Jesus says, wherever two or more people are gathered in my name, I'm there. And that could be at Applebee's. I don't care. Like, whatever. And that's just kind of how I feel about some of these like spiritual communities. It's like, when you really zoom out, the shitty Christian problems are in everything. They are everywhere. You're going to find it in a youth group. You're going to find it in a witchy Discord. You're going to find it at a yoga studio. You're going to find it at a full moon circle. I don't care. I really don't. And my whole thing is like, do you feel at home where you are? If not, let me at least tell you how I feel at home where I'm at and how I got there, and you can figure that out for yourself.
Yeah. And how does your business now play into that? Do you still run a full-time business, or are you also part-time employed or something? What's the combination there?
I am, I used to say I was fun employed just to make myself feel better about it. You know what's really interesting is like even before I switched to Christianity, the half-ass switch and QCO was tanking. And it was tanking because it made me sad and I didn't want to show up. And I was showing up saying things I didn't believe in. I was showing up saying like, or trying to hold space for people who weren't holding space for me. And I hate this whole like holding space thing because it's like, why don't you hold your own space? why don't we just all take up our own spaces and you stay out of mine and I stay out of yours so we can both learn from each other's. But my whole deal about that is just like, why on earth, why on earth um am I doing work, right, that I don't care about? And I also felt like, not to be like, oh, it's oversaturated, whatever. I'm very proud of what I did in the pagan space, and I don't think I need to do anymore. You know, I taught people that they could use the Sims to manifest. I taught people that, like, this is how you do ancestor work in a way that's not scary. This is how you work with deities in a way that works very much for you and how you can incorporate those things. Um, and I feel like I spurred on enough other people to think of their own stuff to then go teach others new stuff. I don't have anything new to say in the pagan space as a pagan. I do have a lot to say as a Christian, and I do have a lot to say as an ex-pagan, and as a spiritual, like an ex-spiritual life coach. So now what's happening is I've actually just started a business called Shifted Sanctuary, which I love so much. My logo's a lighthouse. It's just, I cry every time I look at it. It's disgusting. But I really am passionate about, teaching people how to keep their own lighthouses, how to be that like steady space for themselves, no matter what, even if they are also the boat on the ocean. And I've really been kind of focusing on Substack, which is where I'm putting a lot of my articles and a lot of my personal thoughts. And then we're going to move towards doing Sunday service again, except for not on Sundays, because I don't work on Sundays. That's always been my rule. Actually, I never work on Sundays, no matter what. So I'm thinking about doing like a Bible study that comes at things that also incorporates pagan myths to see parallels, to see where also God shows up in non-English ways, in non-Western ways. And I'm really proud to be able to do that. And actually, this is where I know, right? God, God loves to hit me in my wallet because I love stuff. And all my money goes to like going out to eat food and also like, I'm just like a vain millennial gal. I like skincare. Like, I don't know, whatever, right? Like, and so when a lot of these things that I was able to do with the half-ass switch because I could afford it stopped happening and stopped being able to be accessed by me, I take that as a sign. I don't take it as a punishment. I'm like, all right, God, right? Like, what? Show me where the money is, because that's clearly where you want me to be. And since I've launched all this new stuff, and since I've been really open about how I've been feeling, I've had a lot of people tell me that they're happy to see me light up again, which is wild. People who I haven't really talked to for a long time. And then also I have been not like raking in the cash. I wouldn't even say it's like full time yet. And I'm very blessed to be able to have family that's helped us out, and to have a partner, and also just to be weirdly magically blessed, because sometimes it gets down to the wire even for our bills and our rent, and God will give us just what we need so that we can move on. And that has been that lesson. And now I have like a lot more subscribers in terms of like paying ones for my Substack than I did when I was just doing Schmedium, which was the spiritual like entrepreneurial magazine that I'm going back and forth on whether or not I want to keep that. I think it's cool. It's a good concept. And I think that that's really God telling me, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Because God knows me, if I'm broke and busted, I'm not going to do it. So he lets me be able to, have the good human things that will help enrich me as a human being, and as a spirit, so that I can go and do work and enrich other people. And that's where my business is at. And this last year, especially, but the last 2-3 years, with the financial troubles that we've had, and even with me just kind of, I didn't go like, oh, I'm done with QCO, and then go, okay, I know I'm going to do Christian work. Like, it was a good couple months. I sat there and I was sad, crying, because I felt like I had no purpose. I was like, what am I supposed to do? I want to help people, but like, that what I was doing wasn't helping people anymore. And sitting around on my butt and being like, I want to help people also wasn't helping people. So I had to get to these like really deep truths about how I feel about money and how I feel about scarcity and like public reputation, and how that changes the way that I approach the world and my work. And now that I've kind of grown through God, right? Or what do they say? Like grow where you're planted. Now that I've done that, the growth is coming in very strange ways and in also beautiful ways that you can't help but think are very like divinely orchestrated. And like, you know, and you say like, God, give me a sign, and he's like holding a sign that says this is the sign. It's like my bank account is the sign. I don't have exactly what I wanted to, but I'm, you know, it's those things, that's the cross that we bear. And also like I'm willing to sacrifice my financial comfortability to be able to say that I'm comfortable in my soul and in the work that I'm doing and what I tell people and what I'm leading people to. And that's the most important thing to me.
Hmm. Okay, getting away from all of the performance and the content and the Instagram stuff and the business stuff, what does your private practice look like nowadays? If that's not too private, like, can you give us a look into that, what you do?
Well, it's very actually pretty much the same as it was when I was a pagan. I've never really been a big like ceremonial spell work person. I think that is because I don't come from a Catholic background, which is very like structured in terms of how like you approach God. Like Pentecostalism is, you know, like show up in your jeans on Sunday night and cry while we play a good song, which I love a lot more. I like that it's a lot more accessible. I like that there's no like gatekeeper to God, even in process. I do obviously think that there are important rituals, like and important things just in general that can be observed, but like my private practice is a lot of like I wait for God to talk to me, right? Like that's my whole thing is like I'm not going to go bug God because I think that I need to know something. And that's how I feel about the dead people, where I used to very much seek their advice. I think that I was seeking so much of the advice of the dead, and I'm putting so much weight on my lineage and my ancestors, because in Asian culture, ancestors are so important. That I stopped being myself and I stopped living my life. And so now I allow for, you know, if God tells my dead grandpa, like, please go talk to your granddaughter because she needs to hear it from somebody like you, then I take the message. You know, I don't go out of my way to not listen, but I also am not going out of my way to like, and I don't necessarily even believe that this is how it works, but this is how I guess people will understand this, which is like, I'm not going to go out of my way to pull my ancestors out of God's presence to solve some stupid human problem for me that I could maybe just like sit for an extra 20 minutes and think about. So I pray a lot. I do a lot of Bible study, but when I say Bible study, I literally will like look up the history in every single like iteration of a Bible verse. Right now, I'm really into a lot of the lost gospels. They finally have translated like what they call one of the original gospels, which is the Kieu, which not to be I know it's so fun, like the Kieu, it's me. A lot of people are gonna like mix that up with like QAnon stuff, which is not what it is. There's like a whole long word, and I just say Kieu because it's I don't remember it. But I've been looking at that. I've been looking at, you know, the gospel according to Mary Magdalene. And I've been actually really enjoying coming back to the essence of God as God is, and not as God has been written down, and not as God has been canonized, even, because what the Christian Bible is right now is not all the texts that have been written about God or Jesus or whatever. It's just, you know, what the church was like, all right, here's unit 1, but then nobody ever gave unit 2 or 3. So part of my practice also is I do a prayer journal, which is something that at first, even when I was younger, you know, they tell you do like a prayer journal, write to God. And I used to be like, why can't he just like hear you? And when I say he, when I refer to God, it's just like my Christian training. Personally, I believe God's just like a force, right? God is the wind. There's no gender. God has no hands. Like God can't be a person. And Jesus was a dude. And so, right, like I always say, like if Jesus didn't say it, that's not what God means. That's what somebody else said. So I've been really enjoying that. And when I've been writing in my prayer journal, I've been noticing a lot of ways that words come out of me, which are very like prolific and poetic. And I'm really settling into this like role as a prophet and role as somebody who is delivering the gospel according to me. And I think that, that's probably sacrilegious to a lot of people, but to me, it's the natural progression of things. We need a new gospel. We need new interpretations of Christ and new interpretations of consciousness. And that is a very like trailblazer thing to do, and I'm down to rock whatever boat needs to be rocked. And that actually makes me feel more settled in myself. So I pray, I wait for God to talk to me, and I just live my human life, which is, I think, the most spiritual thing ever. And any spiritual practice is going to tell you to live in the moment and to be the creation of the universe that you are. And that's actually been the easiest when I put all the paganism away, and not necessarily away, but more so put it into the hierarchy of God sent me all of these things that he created to talk to me in whatever way I needed to.
And then how does Daoism play into all of that? Because you also have in your bio something about
I believe
Daoism.
Jesus was a Daoist. No, I believe Jesus was a Daoist. Daoism is not a religious belief. It's not even necessarily a spiritual belief. It's more of like a philosophy. Now, there are like Daoist masters who have written their own like texts. There are Daoist witchcraft practices. There's divination practices that are specifically Daoist. But the whole thing about Daoism is it's like living in the way, right? Wu Wei, which is the act of not being or not doing. That doesn't necessarily, for me, and also when people look into Taoism, people think that Taoism is just like sitting in the grass and just like waiting peacefully for life to move past you, which is not what it is. Taoism is not doing more than you need to do and not doing less than you need to do. Like as a Taoist, I believe that when God tells me I need to go to church, or when God is like, hey, talk about this Chance the Rapper song and talk about how this brought you closer to Christ. And I'm like, yo, why? For what? I believe that is me resisting, right? Like the act of resistance is not Taoist. And for me, like my family is Taoist in terms of my Asian lineage and Asian background, Vietnamese people and Chinese people. And in Vietnam, specifically, Catholicism and Taoism and ancestral veneration are all together and also specifically approved by the Catholic Church. So I believe that when we look at all of these philosophies like Taoism, they're actually just saying the same thing with different words, right? Because the lesson of God is like, just be a good human, don't do more than you need to do, don't do what I don't tell you to do, and then just do what I tell you to do. And if you take the word God out and you say like the natural order of the universe, you're a Taoist. So same, everybody's the same.
Okay. So we slowly have to wrap this up. So I wanted to ask you, sort of as the last question or second to last, that if there is one thing about the Christian community that you could change, what would it be?
I would change that the Christian community is very much centered on white Western colonial Christianity. There, I think that's the real big problem. I think the problem is that a lot of Christians are like, it's the Bible in English or nothing. And that isn't a God problem or a Jesus problem. That is a white people don't want to learn other languages problem. White people don't believe other cultures are valid problem, which I don't like. I'm going to give it that. That's the big one. And then I also think that Christians have stopped doing the true thing that God wants us to do, which is to be where to be where the people need us. The people that are already in church who really, really staunchly believe in like white Western Christianity are not the people that I need to preach to, me specifically. I know that a lot of people don't want to be hanging out in these witchcraft spheres online. And I think a lot of even people I know who are Christians are like, okay, but you should just be going to church now. And you shouldn't be like hanging out with witches. You shouldn't be doing this podcast. You shouldn't whatever. And I think really it's like, to be what God has made me, where he is meant to put me and where he is meant for me to help other people is the most wu-wei Daoist Christian thing that I can do. And that, I think, only comes from my multicultural background, my ability to see that. And I wish that maybe there were more people who were open about mixing their ancestral cultures in a way that honors God. And I wish that the church was more open to receive that.
And to wrap up, is there a question that maybe you thought I would ask you and I haven't asked you, or anything else you want to say, something that you feel is missing, anything that you would have liked me to ask you?
That nobody has ever like, what did you think I was gonna ask you? I do always like kind of prepare for these things, and I usually am ready for people to ask me about like my sexuality and my queerness, and about how I can justify what the church does, which I don't. I never justify the sins of a human person just because they say it's, for God. There's that thing where, they talk about like Satan and the devil, and if you believe in that, Satan is called the deceiver for a reason. He's good at his job. He's not going to walk out and be like, I'm Satan. Like, no, he's definitely going to use shitty people in the church to keep people away from the church and to keep people away from like themselves. And I think that's really, really what I expected. And I'm glad I didn't get that question because I'm tired of answering it. For the literal love of God, I am tired of answering it. And I'm just so happy that, I really trust you as a person to do interviews like this with anybody, because I trust your integrity, and I trust that you come at this from like a human standpoint, right? Like, you are doing a godly thing, treating people how they would want to be treated. You're giving me a place to be myself where others won't, and also sometimes where I won't. So that's what I want to say is like, you are an example, and a lot of other witches like you and a lot of other people who do what you do in the way you do it. That's the example of a good Christian and the example of a good witch.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. I really appreciate that.
I'm gonna go cry
Okay.
now.
Yeah, I was kind of tearing up, but then I was like, calm down.
Like, stop.
Okay, well, that's everything. So to finish up, like all the podcasts, tell people where they can find you. I suppose Instagram, I'll link anything down below anyways, but what are like your most important channels that you want people to go to get to know you better or see you?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram. Instagram is where you can't teach an old dog that many new tricks. So I know Instagram the best. Find me on Instagram. I'm also on Threads. I love Threads. It's disgusting. It is a delightful, just void app. I fucking love it. That's what Twitter used to be, and I'm glad. And then also Substack, because Substack is, I just discovered it in this like last year, but I'm going to be doing podcasts. I'm going to be doing a lot of like other interviews with people, and also just my own thoughts. I got cool playlists and shit on there. I don't know, but that's where you can find me. And then eventually I've reserved it on the internet. I just haven't built it yet, but shiftedsanctuary.com, and Shifted Sanctuary on Instagram. That's where like the promotional stuff is going to be. So like, if you don't really care about me, but you want to be like, oh, there's a new podcast episode or whatever, and you don't care about pictures of my cat Panchetta, which rude. God is putting her in front of you for a reason because she's a gorgeous piece of work. Then you can find me on those places. But I'm around. People will find me. If you really want to find me that bad, you can find me.
Okay, well, then let's wrap up. Thank you so much for sitting with me and answering these questions. You're very eloquent, and it's always really fun to talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I'm excited to see the end of this. And I just love you so much. Yes. God bless you. All the God.
I love that ending. That's it. We're done. What did you think of the interview? For me, what struck me the most, I think, was that there are fewer differences in her view now and back then than I thought there would be. I thought it would be wildly different now that she is Christian, but there are quite a few things that she still believes in or still works with. So I'm surprised by that. And also I found it interesting that she mentioned some community issues that I definitely have perceived in the pagan community as well, which is why I was gone for a while. The forced intimacy she talked about, and this idea that, oh, we're all very woke, we're all very progressive, but then when it actually comes to things like racism or colonialism, people are a lot less educated than you would expect from someone who says that they are mindful of these things. And I think that's sort of the same in every community. You always have certain issues like that. And I understand that for Kieu at this point, it was more helpful for them to go back to a community that they knew, which was Christian, and to work with that and to be there for that community. So tell me, how did you feel about this interview? What did you think before? What do you think now? Would you still follow Kieu? Would you still listen to what they say? Or are you done after this interview or even before that interview? I'll continue to follow them because I think it's always interesting to hear different perspectives that you might not consider in your usual everyday life or in your practice. And of course, if they had gone completely Doreen Virtue, saying that we're all going to hell as witches, I wouldn't follow them anymore, but it doesn't seem that they did that, or it's clear that they didn't do that. So yes, I thought it was really enlightening, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Leave your comments below, and I will see you very, very soon.